Let's take a minute and talk about irrational thoughts. You might be wondering what I'm talking about. I'm wondering what I'm talking about. But it's funny, this week taxes were due. If you filed an extension, your taxes were due by October 15th. And I found myself waiting until October 14th to start my taxes, just to submit them on October 15th at the end of the day. And what's funny about that is it got me thinking is, why did I wait so long to do them? There was nothing, I mean, they're not easy. There's some complexity to it. There's obviously a lot of information gathering, etc. But I've been putting this off since, when was it originally due? April? Got an extension, putting it off. But it wasn't that I was just putting it off because I was busy or because I couldn't do it, because I was lacking information. I was just putting it off because I didn't want to. But the thing about it is that in the back of my head, I was always thinking, don't forget to do your taxes, don't forget to do your taxes, don't forget to do your taxes. But yet, even though I had that subtle reminder in my head, which might have been minimal, it went on for months and months and months and months until I finally did my taxes, which took me all of maybe 2 or 3 hours total. So it just made me think, man, what are some other crazy things that, are in my head, for lack of a better term? Why do I think about taxes that way? And then I thought, oh, you know what? Just this week, I also finally dealt with a stack of medical bills that I had from when I hurt my arm earlier in the year. Been to a couple different doctors, a couple different therapy sessions, x-rays, MRIs. So you get these little bills afterwards, $40 here, $50 here, $100 here. But it's not that it was an insurmountable task or that it was a tremendous amount of money. It was just, I just didn't want to deal with it. Whether it was I didn't want to remember my accident, or I didn't want to, I don't know, I think it is probably that I didn't want to remember my accident. But nonetheless, those bills need to get paid, right? But for whatever reason, I'm just delaying, all the way to the point where it's like, hey, if you don't pay this, you might go to collections. It's like, dude, what are you doing? So I get that stack of medical bills and bring it with me to work, knock it out. Maybe 15 minutes. One issue, one provider didn't have my insurance card, so my bill was huge. It's like $3,000. 2 phone calls later, bill's reprocessed against my insurance, and I'll be getting an updated bill here in the next couple weeks. I've been sitting on that for months, just never did it. But why? I think it's just because we don't want to face these obstacles sometimes, so we just avoid them. And it's funny, I'm reminded of the work that Ryan Holiday does in the Stoics and how they talk about basically the obstacle is the way. The impediment to action advances action. Once I did those 2 things, I felt so much better. It was just like a weight was moved off my shoulders. So what else might there be as far as irrational thoughts, or even maybe fears that I've been dealing with, or maybe not dealing with, that I should? One of which, it's kind of funny, but also maybe a little bit shallow, is that I like making these videos. I like making podcasts. But oftentimes when I go to make a video, I'm like, dude, you're not professional enough to communicate those ideas. Oftentimes I make these videos, it's 10, 11 o'clock at night. By that time I've already worked all day, came home, maybe played with the boys and showered, so my hair's not done. So I have a hat on. It's like, dude, who's gonna take you seriously if you have a hat on? I personally like wearing hats. I'm not wearing one right now, but in my head, that's a little excuse to say, nope, you definitely can't talk about anything business related or anything to do with personal development or self-help or sharing any of those stories, because you're just some dude with a backwards hat on, right? You look like you're dressed like a bum or a teenager. Nobody will take you seriously. And I don't even know where that comes from. And then if we're talking about hats, talk about hair. The other thing is like, dude, if you're gonna do a professional video, my career is in technology, application development, data analytics. So I'm very interested in those areas. But I feel like, well, you can't make a video talking about modeling or predictive analytics or web applications or product development if you don't look professional. You should probably be wearing a button-up. I'm wearing a black t-shirt with a pocket on it, right? You definitely can't have a backwards hat on. Your hair needs to be done. I don't even know where these misconceptions or preconceived notions come from, but I know that they're in there, and oftentimes they get in the way of doing the work. I really think it's just like a defense mechanism, like you're protecting yourself from exposure, possible ridicule, right? By coming up with these random excuses. And then on the topic of hats and hair, it's like, man, dude, you got to do something about your hair. Your hair's thinning, or your hairline's receding. Like, dude, definitely don't get on camera. I mean, absolutely not. All the people on YouTube have great hair. Peter McKinnon, Chris Howe, Maddie, they all have great hair. You can't do it. It's like, dude, what are you thinking? Like, that's not real. Give me a break. Another excuse. So, keeping on that thread, talking about videos, talking about technology, talking about putting out media and art, right? I look around my office. I have Nikon D750 over there, a Z50 over there, a Z6 right here that I'm recording on. I've got drones. I've got this computer. I've got MacBooks. I've got a Rodecaster. I have all this gear. I'm surrounded by all of this gear. I've spent more time researching cameras, researching drones, than I actually have using said cameras or using drones. I have a brand new Mavic Air 2 that I haven't even flown. I know that there are times where I'll get so caught up in just doing the research on what's the best this or what's the best that will actually get in the way or almost seem more important than actually using the gear that I have, right? And it's crazy. I mean, I look around my office. I have lenses that I don't even use. I have cameras that I don't use. I have a whole bunch of stuff in that closet that I probably don't use either. You just can't. You can't possibly use everything. But what oftentimes happens, at least speaking for myself, is that it's easier to get wrapped up in the research, in buying the new items, finding the best deal, or trying to figure out what might make things easier or better, right? I'm worried about shooting in 4K 10-bit RAW to an external recorder, yet I haven't actually edited and posted a video on YouTube in months. And if you think creating 4K videos and then trying to edit those is somehow going to make it easier, you're wrong. It only makes things harder. But in your head, it's like, oh man, you definitely can't even put your stuff out there if you're not shooting XYZ. If you're not using an XLR mic, if you're not recording external to the camera, if you don't have a Rodecaster to make your podcast, if you don't have a Shure SM7B, then your podcast is never going to be as good as Joe Rogan's. Well, I'll tell you what, you give Joe Rogan a different mic, his podcast would still be really good. Might not sound the same, but it'd still be really good. But that guy shows up every single day to do that podcast. And that's what matters. So it's just funny sitting back, thinking about some of these things and how totally irrational they are. But how even knowing that sometimes is not enough. It's getting to a point where you're willing to actually take that first step And it sounds silly. It sounds so silly, but gathering up all of the documents to do my taxes or to pay those medical bills and putting them in a folder and putting that folder inside of my book bag on the way to work, right? Because I knew on my lunch break that's what I was going to do. That was the first step. And then once you open that, envelope or that folder and you've got a stack like this, it's like, dude, this is going to be crazy. But then you realize most of that stuff you don't need, right? It's not that bad. Once you start doing it, paid 1, paid 2, paid 3, 4, man, we're done. This is done and it's out of my head and I can move on to the next thing. That obstacle has been cleared. Those taxes have been filed. There's no more of this small voice in the back of my head saying, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do this. I just did it. Same thing with this video, right? Just use the gear that you have. Maybe it's not the best gear out there, sure, but it's better than what some people have. And they're still making videos. This won't be the last gear that I buy. Absolutely not. But for right now, this is what I have. And what matters is making the art, sharing your message, the creative process, not what camera I'm recording on. Because I guarantee it won't make a difference if you don't ever publish the video. And about looking or coming across as unprofessional, I don't know why, that sticks out in my head, but could you take advice from someone who's wearing a backwards hat? Could someone wearing a backwards hat teach you something that you don't know? I like to think so. I think that you can take people seriously if they're wearing a t-shirt. I don't think that the costume or the pageantry that comes with dressing up necessarily provides any additional value. I think it might, on the surface, make someone appear to have standing. But I think if the goal is not to be perceived as someone of knowledge or someone that's helpful or someone that has ideas to share, but to actually share your ideas and be helpful and knowledgeable and, try to help others learn from some of the things that you've done. If that's the goal, then who cares what you're wearing? I certainly don't, or I shouldn't. I would love to get more comfortable, right? Being, as they say, your authentic self, than to feel like I need to meet some minimum requirement before I can even get started. It doesn't sound so hot. I don't think I like that. So, what's the point of this video? I think really it's just to hold myself accountable, to document kind of this spot that I'm in, and give myself something to look back at and say, oh, remember when you used to worry if your hair was done or not before you make a video? Remember when you didn't want to wear a backwards hat and talk about technology or analytics or product development because you didn't think people would take you seriously? Remember when you worried more about your gear than actually putting out content? Remember when you worried more about your microphone than you actually did recording a podcast? Oh yeah, just look back at that video and it'll put you in that place and you can see how far you've come. So hopefully this helps. Some irrational thoughts and my interpretation of them. And, hopefully drawing a line in the sand to say, you know what, from this point forward, let's try to do things a little bit differently. Let's try to really be objective about some of those thoughts and also not to let them get in the way of the bigger picture, right? And that is ultimately to, I think, be your authentic self and create your art and put that into the world and hope that impacts someone. So until next time, see ya.